Hello everybody and welcome to the interview. Today we have a very special guest to talk about the 60s, Gene Campbell.
Hi, Zach.
Hi, well, I'm glad you could join us today.
Me too. I was really glad and honored that you asked me.
Please tell us a little about yourself. What is your full name?
Well, my full name is Jean M. Marvelous Marie Campbell.
Very interesting. Who would have thought their parents would have had a middle name Marvelous?
I know, I was just giving you a little bad time there.
What is your place of birth?
My place of birth is Los Angeles, California, and I am totally a Cal gal, surfer gal. I grew up on the beach.
So you are out of your element here in Georgia. We have very few beaches here.
Well, yeah, you are exactly correct. We moved here 30 years ago, so I lived over half of my life out in California. And the first thing I have to do when I go back out, because we do go 4 times a year, is get that sand between my toes and smell the surf.
So I'm going to go ahead and assume you spent majority of your life in California.
You're exactly correct. I did spend the majority of my life, and it was a very traumatic move, moving to the South. 2 different cultures, totally.
Completely different. Have you ever served in the military?
I have not served in the military, but my ex-husband did. He was a Marine during the Vietnam era.
All right, and what is your religious affiliation?
I am a Christian, Catholic Christian, and it's very important to my values.
I guess that's where I get that from.
I think so, because your mom is too, and so that means you are too. Hopefully.
What is the best advice you can give this generation?
Well, first off, the most important thing, life isn't fair. That's the first thing you've got to get under your belt. The second thing is you have to understand that everybody needs to do good, for good is good to do. You're not going to get a trophy for showing up, especially when you grow up and you go to your first job. Not everybody's going to tell you you're doing a great job when you show up. You've got to work hard, and not everybody's going to compliment you on your job. You have to know you're doing good from the inside out. If you know you're doing your very best, you don't need people telling you all the time that you're doing a good job. And another thing that you need to know is that you're not going to get everything you want. You're not going to get the highest pay as soon as you walk in the door. You need to earn it. And I think that's the problem with today's generation, is that they've been told they are fabulous, they are wonderful, their self-esteem can't have any little bruises or bumps. So remember, life isn't fair, and do good, for good is good to do. That's what I have to say to this generation.
Thank you for those very powerful words to our generation. Now let's move on to our topic today, which would be the Vietnam War and the time period. Did you have a job during this time?
Well, I guess you could say my job was that of being a student, a wife, and a mother. Because when the war started, I was in college, then I got married, and then I became a mother.
Where did you attend college?
I was at UC Santa Barbara, and that was a campus that was situated right on the coast. So, as you can tell, I like to go surfing, and I like the beach, so it was perfect.
Spent a lot of time in the sun, it sounds like.
Yes, as you can tell by my face.
Do you think the war changed America in any way?
Yes. The Vietnam War? Yes.
The Vietnam War.
The Vietnam War did change America in a lot of ways. The rose-colored glasses came off of all of the young people and the adults in America. Everybody had been cushioned after World War II with, there was a slight recession, but everybody was concerned about family and the values and the good times, happy days, Leave It to Beaver style life. And the rose-colored glasses came off because there was, people realized that war is ugly and that politics weren't always above board and honest with us on what was going on. And of course, in World War II, you didn't know that either, but it just seemed that because of the 60s and everything that was going on, people we're more aware of that. So yes, it changed America. We had, not only was the Vietnam War going on, but you had the counterculture revolution with the hippies, you had the drugs, you had rock and roll, and you had the politics. You had, geez, there was just so much going on at that point in time.
So it sounds like this giant veil was lifted off of the public, and they could now see what was really going on.
No, they didn't see what was really going on. I mean, we also had the civil rights movement going on right now, because you got to realize that everything that they were seeing was orchestrated by the media. Okay, but we did get more information than that what they used to get in World War II.
All right, next question. Did you participate or experience in any protests in your area?
Yes, I did. When I was in college, I protested quite a bit the Vietnam War. Although I was very, very naive, Zach, when I did that. I didn't really understand why I was protesting, except for, you know, I was from the peace and love generation, that everybody should just get along and kumbaya. So I really didn't have any deep understanding of what the war was really all about. It was just that we were protesting because war is evil. It was a very shallow understanding of the war and of morals and values and of just being black and white.
So it wasn't really, there was no, the way you saw it, there wasn't no color, it was just all like centered around us just wanting to fight.
Correct. It was just that America was at all wrong. We shouldn't be involved in this war, so we just need to get out. And so that's what we were protesting about, is that all war was evil. All war is wrong, and we shouldn't be fighting. It was all kumbaya, peace, peace, brother, peace, love, and rock and roll.
Were you affected by the war in any way?
Yes. Being from a generation in which we were given pretty much everything. I mean, our parents, gave us so much after World War II. We were all like in this little cocoon. It was like a happy days situation. We had plenty of clothes. We had plenty of food.
It was equivalent to a golden age.
Exactly. It was a golden age. Even though we were a part of the culture that was involved in that. There was a huge part that was disenfranchised, but the part that's really, a lot of us were in this little bubble, and we were given so much. And so when we were fighting and protesting, we didn't really understand the ramifications of what we were doing, okay? In addition to that, we had the civil rights movement. There were riots going on, huge riots going on. And the whites really didn't really understand that and didn't understand where they were coming from. And although it isn't right to riot, there's other ways of solving that situation. It's what happened. There was a lot of animosity going on in that generation, and you were angry about the war, you were angry at the politicians, you were angry at everything at that time.
Do you think that the factors that happened in America contributed to the hatred towards the Vietnam War?
The hatred towards the Vietnam War, that's a good question. The factors in America, I think so. Because in the service, everybody was drafted into the service, the soldiers that went over there to fight. But you still had two different, you had your blacks, you had your Mexicans, and you had your whites. There wasn't a whole lot of intermingling of the races at that point. And they were over there, they were in a very difficult situation. Very difficult situation. And they were doing the best that they could. And I don't think America was honest with them. Of course, in any war, no country is honest with what's going on over there. I'm not trying to rationalize it. I'm just saying the way it is. That no country is totally honest with what is really happening in a war.
Thank you. Did you have any friends or relatives fight in the Vietnam War?
Yes. My husband was a Marine, but he didn't go fight because I was married, my ex-husband, and he didn't have to go. But we had a neighbor that was in our development that was pretty crazy, and I'm sure he had PTSD. And he came home and was telling stories when we would have parties and stuff like that. And they were pretty shocking about how he treated people when he was flying the helicopter over the villages and how they would be shooting. And they didn't know if they were shooting Viet Cong or the Vietnamese, but they were flying over these villages low and just blasting away. And I remember being shocked, and I thought, how do you justify what you did? How do you sleep at night? But then that's war. You stop and you think about what the Viet Cong were doing. Am I trying to rationalize? I don't know. But the Viet Cong, our men were stepping on bamboo. Man, they'd be snapped up, slapped up against a tree and have, bamboo through the middle of their stomachs. These people were seeing this, and how they react in these situations is interesting, psychologically and physically. Physically, I'm sure their bodies broke down from PTSD, like our neighbors did, and drugs shielded them from the full effects of it.
Did you have any relatives or friends fight in any previous wars?
Yeah, my dad. My dad was in World War II. He was all in the Pacific area. He was in Pearl Harbor, and talking about being affected by the war. Yes, he was affected by the war. And back then, not everybody knew everything instantaneously like they do now. And when they were told to do something, they did it. And my dad was in the radar, and he was in a lot of battles out in the Pacific, and he came back affected by the war. He had like a gray stripe down his head from all the trauma of the war, and he had a lot of physical conditions. He died at 54 years of age. And all of his physical ailments, now I realize, is PTSD. And war does affect people, and we need to be there for our people when they come back.
You definitely see more cases of PTSD today, probably because of our medical advancements. See a lot of it in the news now.
Yes, and back then, a lot of our soldiers didn't make it, and the ones that did make it, yes, they had physical ailments, but they weren't as able to get around like they are today with all of the bionic arms and legs that we have now.
How did you feel about the war?
It's interesting you should ask that, because I was very naive. And I'm going to look at it as looking back, and also from the perspective in which I was enmeshed in it. At 18 and 15, 16, 17, 18, I was very idealistic. I was totally against the war because war is evil. Flat out, I didn't have really any huge understanding of all the complications and all the ramifications and all the decisions that we made to get into the war. I never understood that it was a civil war. I never understood really that it was about a fight for communism. I never understood that we got sucked into the war because the French left and that we went in. I mean, when you're 18 years old and you're protesting, I was just on a very simplistic, I'm against the war. Now I'm still against the Vietnam War. It was a bad decision that we made, but only from hindsight, looking back, seeing all the decisions that were made were very poor decisions. And there were a lot of soldiers that died from a war that we couldn't win because the commitment wasn't there to win like in World War II.
So what you're saying is that we should have just let it be, let the Civil War play out.
Let the Civil War play out, unfortunately, yes.
Thank you. How did you feel about the soldiers?
I am ashamed of myself, and I am embarrassed. The soldiers were doing the best they could. But when I was, like I said, 15, 16, 17, and 18, I am embarrassed to say that I was not proud of the soldiers, and I was very derogatory to the soldiers in fighting that war. Looking back, they were only doing their job. They were doing what they were told. And the reason that we were so against the soldiers is because we weren't really supporting our soldiers. This was not a war, like I said, of commitment. And it was like a dirty war, and the media portrayed it that way, and the drugs and everything that was going on at that time period. We weren't supporting our soldiers, and we should always support our soldiers because they are giving their lives for our country. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been able to protest. We wouldn't have been able to have the right to protest. So we should have been treating our soldiers a lot better. So that is one of the reasons I really do support the Wounded Warrior Project. We need to be there for our soldiers when they come back. And I feel really bad about that.
A lot of people felt that way. A lot of people did not support the soldiers and spoke out against them.
Yeah, and I feel bad for them, and they suffered tremendously because of that, and I feel very bad. Very bad.
All right. How do you feel about this war being the first televised war?
That was something, because that was the very first war that came into our living rooms. I could be sitting in this chair watching TV and watching a battle occur. Granted, it was from the reporter's viewpoint or from the reporter's bias, but I was still watching a war. I was watching people being killed and soldiers being mutilated and burned, and it was awful. Awful. It really was, and it really drove home the horrors of the war, period, and again, fueled the protests because people really didn't understand war. You read about it, and hearing about it is two different things than actually seeing it. And even seeing it on TV isn't like being in it. I mean, you're still very much removed. But now looking back, I realized it was a very biased what we were seeing. But yeah, it changed the course of how we interpret events around the world. So it's television.
So you're saying it opened a lot of people's eyes to what?
Yes, it did.
But it opened their eyes to what the media wanted them to see?
Exactly. It was what the media and what the politicians wanted us to see too, and it's still that way.
Moving on. What were your feelings about the technological advances of this time?
Wow, it was a crazy time to live in because we had, oh my gosh, you had Telstar, the satellite, the Sputnik, which was the race to outer space. And at that time, there was a definite pride in America that JFK instilled in all of us, and that America was the best and the brightest and we could do anything. And that it wasn't what your country could do for you. It was what you could do for your country, which is just the opposite way of thinking now. But we just grabbed the bull by the horns and our technology took off. Not only was it in outer space, but it was in like the televisions, it was in transistor radios, which really changed how we listened to music and how we got our news because we could take our radios with us. We didn't have to leave them in the house. The same with the portable TV. That happened during the 60s. Color TV. So then not only was the war in your front room, but it was in, unfortunately, living color too, which was shocking. Then you had all the advances in outer space and how to feed the astronauts trickled out to us in the general population, right? And powdered foods and powdered drinks and the MREs, the rations, the meals on wheels, like they're called, and also medical advances, computer. I mean, there were so many different technologies that were occurring. The microwave, and we all need the microwave. You know, there were so many different things occurring. We were like that. And America seemed to be right at the forefront of everything. There was a certain pride in everything that we did.
We were leading the technological revolution.
We were leading the technological.
We are still living through.
Yes, but unfortunately America has taken a back seat to that because it seems that the mantra is now, what can the country do for you instead of what you can do for the country.
And let's move on to our last question before we are out of time. What do you think would have been different if America did not get involved in the war?
You know, Zach, that's a good question. And you know what? You can't look back. You can't say, what if? That's what, in my whole life, I could say that. What if? What if I didn't do this? What if I didn't do that? We got involved in that war. But the problem is we didn't learn anything from that war. America is still repeating the same mistakes. We didn't learn from World War I, World War II, Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan War. I mean, it is still, we are still, the world, and it's not just America, the world is still making the same mistakes. The wars are different. There seems to be that America has lost their will to win. If we believe in what we're saying and what we're doing, and in the Vietnam War, we didn't have the will to win, and we still don't have the will to win today, okay? World War II, we did have the will to win. The European side did, along with America, and we won. But you don't see that today. So, can't look back. We have to look forward and try to make the world a better place. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that we were leading it. We were in the driver's seat, and all of a sudden we got up and moved to the trunk.
That's a very good example, because we hit ourselves. For some reason or another, Zach, the population today is apologizing for being America, for being American. America is not perfect, but we are a damn good country. We have human rights. We have women's rights. We're not perfect, but we're getting there. We have our Constitution, and it's a Bill of Rights. How many countries in the world do not have this? And you can see this. ISIS today, they are fighting to instill Sharia law. There are no rights. We have gay rights. We have women's rights. We have voters' rights. Everybody, women can drive. Women can vote. In these countries over there, they don't have that. And you know, America isn't perfect, and America is a lot of people are putting down America all the time. And like I said, America isn't perfect, but it's a pretty damn good place to live. And we need to remember our values and why we're here and why America was formed, and regain that pride again. And quit apologizing for being American.
Can't change history.
We can't change history, can't change the fact, but we can make it better, and we aren't. And we need to realize that when we're electing our leaders, that we need to look past what the media is putting out there for the instantaneous grasping of facts, but look behind the facts, look behind our leaders, look behind what they stand for. What is their morals? What is their values? What do they see for the future of America? Do they see America that has people employed, or do they see America for people that are entitled? Do they see America where they are on the forefront of technology, or they see us apologizing for what we have? This is what we really need to sit back and look at. This is what, if we're going to look at anything about the wars, what we can change. You can't look at what that is, but we can change what's going to happen, and that's what we got to look at. What can we do to make it better? And that's what I'm afraid is not happening right now.
Okay, thank you for your time today.
Zach, I want to thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. I really enjoyed it. The 60s were not a great time. They were a very tumultuous time. It's a very soul-searching time. Everybody says, oh, how cool to grow up in those times. But it was a very difficult time to grow up in, because there was the morals and the values and the war. Everything was in constant flux. There was no real right or wrong. It was, if it feels good, do it. And it's still carrying on to this day. But we were at just the beginning of that wave of change in America, and it's still going on. But thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you today.
Thank you. And that is all we have. Big thank you to Jean Campbell, my grandma. And we will see you next time.